History of Ukraine. Ukraine is a very ancient country. Its history begins to be described in ancient annals from the founding of the capital, Kiev. This is today's Kiev. According to legend, Kiev was founded by three brothers, Kish, Chek, Horiv, and their sister Libit. Kiev was named in honor of their older brother. The Libit River flows in Kiev, and there is also the Libitska metro station. 9th–10th centuries. At first our state was called Kiev Rus. Princes ruled it. Prince Volodymyr is one of the most famous princes of Kiev Rus. Under him, Kiev Rus adopted Christianity. The whole nation was baptized in the waters of the largest river of Ukraine, the Dnipro. Our princes very actively cooperated with the kings of France, Sweden, and other European countries. 11th–12th centuries. Century later, Kiev Rus was ruled by another prince named Volodymyr Monomach. His son Yuri Dolgoruki founded Moscow, and the son of Yuri Dolgoruki has already gone to war in Kiev. So the confrontation between Kiev and Moscow has actually been going on since the founding of the latter. In the 13th century, almost the entire territory of Kiev Rus was mercilessly destroyed by the Tatar-Mongol yoke. The enemy was stopped only in the west of our country, and therefore the capital was moved to that part. King Danilo Hauitsky became the ruler. He founded the city of Lviv, naming it after his son, whose name was Lev. This is today's Lviv. The weakened state became a target for its neighbors. Then Poland, Lithuania, Moscow, Turkey tried to capture parts of its territory. In the 5th century, Sich, a unique military group, was formed on the banks of the Dnieper to repel enemies. Cossacks, warriors courageously defeated all attackers on the battlefield, so mystical legends began to circulate about them. One of them concerned the invisible Cossack Sirko. After his death, the Cossacks began to take the hand of their dead brother with them into battle, and every battle in which they took this hand, the Cossacks won. In legend, Cossacks were also famous for other abilities, such as passing through walls, teleporting, not burning in fire, etc. Such Cossacks were nicknamed characterniks. The topic of characterniks remains very popular in literature to this day. For example, books about the characterniks of such authors as Ruslan Bedov and Vasil Shklar. There is a world-famous Cossack dance, hopak, which is actually a Cossack martial art. The commander of the Cossacks was the hetman. One of the most famous hetmans is Bogdan Khmelnytsky, under whom many victories were won in the 17th century. But with him The infamous agreements with Moscow on military aid were signed, which Moscow gradually used more and more for its own benefit. The presence of its troops on the territory of Ukraine grew more and more, and the rights of our people became less and less. Despite the oppression, the Ukrainian people continued to fight for the right to Ukrainian identity. So, for example, in 1710, Hetman Philip Orlik adopted the first constitution of Ukraine. It is generally considered the first constitution in the world. For 300 years, starting from the 18th century, Russia constantly tried to influence Ukraine. By trickery, it put in powerful people, bribed someone, punished others. These are all prohibitions of the Ukrainian language in Ukraine by the Russian Tsars. The Ukrainian language and culture was constantly oppressed. Even the Gospels written by our monks were burned. Whole libraries were burning. Books were subject to strict censorship. Even a primer for children was not allowed to be printed in Ukraine. Cossacks who refused to obey the orders of the Russian Tsars were banned. The study of the Russian language became mandatory in all educational institutions. In theaters, all performances had to take place only in Russian. At the end of the 19th century, it was even forbidden to call children by Ukrainian names. Everyone who showed disagreement or opposition was punished. They were thrown into prisons, sent to Siberia for hard labor, or to fight. Russia constantly waged wars. Sometimes with Turkey, then with the Kazakhs, then in the Caucasus. The famous Ukrainian writer Taras Shevchenko was also sentenced to military service. Short-lived relief came for Ukraine at the beginning of the 20th century, when power in Russia was weakened and later destroyed by the Bolsheviks. The Ukrainian cultural space has become incredibly enriched. Ukrainian poets and writers began to be published. In 1917, Mikhailo Hrushevsky became the first president of Ukraine. But after the victory of the Bolsheviks over the Tsar, they also attacked us. Some of our people were convinced that communism is good, some were fought with. In the end, this led to all the tragedies of the 20th century. 3 famines, among which the genocide of the Ukrainian people in 1933, when up to 10 million Ukrainians were starved to death, is recognized in most countries. War, mass shootings, forced labor, abuse. The entire Ukrainian elite was destroyed en masse. Scientists, poets, priests. In 1932 there was a very good harvest, but all the food was taken from the people. The Bolsheviks destroyed houses, split open the walls in search of hidden grain. It was revenge on the Ukrainians for not wanting to obey the Bolsheviks. My grandfather lived through it and told me. Children were shot for picking up fallen ears of corn in the field after the harvest. In the 1990s, when Ukraine finally freed itself from Russian enslavement, it began to rapidly revive. For 30 years, our people have done the impossible. This is especially noticeable now, when many were forced to emigrate due to the war. If 20-30 years ago emigrants wondered how everything works, harmoniously in Europe, in America, how many different goods and services there are, how many opportunities there are for development. Now a new wave of immigrants sees that in many respects Ukraine has already caught up with the countries of the First World, and in some moments even overtook. For example, electronic document management. We have our documents in our phone on a special resource and can order help or complain there. Or banking. I can solve most problems or tasks related to my finances either by myself, by pressing a button in my electronic banking, or by calling an operator within a few minutes. We already had modern amusement parks. We had playgrounds literally in every yard, convenient and fast transport. In a city with a population of about 1.5 million, my native Kharkiv, I used public transport to get to the city center in half an hour, where most of the infrastructure and cultural facilities are located. It was almost never necessary to use several modes of transport because the roads were carefully thought out. The supermarkets were located about a third of a mile apart, and many were open 24 hours a day. If I was canning cucumbers at night, for example, and I didn't have enough vinegar, there was no problem. I used to run to the nearby store at least at 2 o'clock in the night and return home 50 minutes later with everything I needed. It was safe to walk on our streets even at night. Now, unfortunately, a lot of things have been destroyed. Some cities are completely destroyed. But the Ukrainian people continue to fight for their freedom and the opportunity to express themselves. And Ukrainian people are very grateful for the support of the entire civilized world. Ukraine will win.